Hello, today we're going to discuss how to use Excel to graph your chemistry data as it pertains to experiments or homework assignments that you may have. Little word of advice before we begin, always use the Excel desktop app rather than the online version because some of the tools are not available on the online version, so always use the app. Okay, so let's say that you have this data from an experiment and you want to graph concentration versus absorbance. So what you're going to do is you're going to select this data, and then you're going to press Insert. Then you're going to click on this button right here, XY Scatter, and you are going to click this option, Scatter. And all of the formatting of this graph that I will be showing you is all of the formatting that I was taught for all of my chemistry courses. But make sure to check with your professor or teacher to see if they have specific things that they're wanting to see on that graph, or not wanting to see on that graph. But I will show you the tools for success and how to figure it out. So here, let's first make sure that the data is on the right axis. So we're going to press Select Data. And then here, you can see the X values, and just click on this button. And this is what we want our X values to be, or what's graphed on the X axis. So it has absorbance, but we actually want concentration. So we are just going to take this concentration and press Enter. And we're going to do the same thing under the Y values. We want to graph absorbance on the Y. So we're going to take that and press Enter. And then press OK. And now the correct things are on the X and the Y axis. And that's also really helpful. Let's say we wanted to graph concentration and volume of stock solution. It's helpful to know how to do that so you can grab something from over here and over here, because if you're just selecting two things, you can't really do that. Okay, so let's start with these major axis grid lines. So I was always taught that we do not want them. So just click on them with your cursor and press Delete. Same thing on this way, click, delete, adios. Now let's click on these axis lines, and I'm double clicking, and then this on the right pops up. So what we want is tick marks. So you just click on tick marks, and I always like to do both major and minor, and I would choose the cross option. However, I think that's just a personal preference, so if you rather inside or whatever you want, you can do that. And again, we'll do the same thing to the x-axis, click on the axis, and then just click on the tick marks. Perfect. And now what we are going to do is we are going to add some axis labels. So again, we're just clicking on the x-axis, and then we're going up here to add chart element, and let's go to axis titles, and let's do primary horizontal. And then here you're just labeling what you put on this axis. In our case, it was concentration in molarity. Make sure to always say units, otherwise you will get marked down and lose points. Now let's do the same thing for the y-axis. And if something ever happens up here where you lose your way, like let's say you're on formulas or something, just go here to chart design, and then all of this stuff will pop up. And let's go to add chart element, axis titles, primary vertical, and say what is on the y-axis. In this case, it's absorbance. Perfect. Now you will see that the chart title auto-populated here. In some of my lower division chemistry courses, the professor was fine with a chart title, or that's what they wanted. But in a lot of the later ones, they want a figure caption. So just know what your professor wants you to do. But in this case, I'm going to delete the chart title. We do not want that. And now it is gone. And again, that was just click and delete. Now let's add a trend line. So in order to do this, you're going to go back here to the upper left corner and go to add chart element and to trend line. Now for this graph and a lot of the other graphs that you're wanting to do, if it's linear, you're going to want this trend line, the linear one. So click there, and that popped up beautifully. Now we're going to want an equation for that trend line so that you can use it in your calculations. It's just very helpful and also a requirement to have. So I just double clicked on this trend line, and then this on the right populated. And what we're going to do is click on this button. And you can see this is where if you needed to change what type of trend line you wanted, this is where you could do that. But we are going to display the equation on chart and display R squared value on chart. Now, a lot of the times, Excel sometimes puts this like right there. You don't want that. So in order to move it, just click on it and drag it somewhere close to the trend line so you know that's what it's for. But you need to be able to read it, and your professor needs to be able to read it. So just make sure that's visible. Okay, so that is about it. There is another thing here. There's kind of a lot of zeros. So if you wanted to change these numbers to, let's say, scientific notation, again, you just click on this axis, click on this button, and then go down to number. And here under category, it's currently general, but you could scroll and change it to scientific. And then there you can see all the numbers change to scientific, which you could also change the number of decimal places that those numbers have. So we could change it to 3, and then I press enter, and you can see there's 3. In this case, it's probably better at 2, or however, it just really depends on your data and what you have, but we can leave it at 2. You can do the same thing, obviously, with the y-axis. You just click on it and do the same thing, and the same thing with the trend line. So I just clicked on it. This comes up under number. It's currently general. You could again change that to scientific, change the amount of decimal places if you need that. But for this data and the numbers that we have, it makes more sense to be general. So we will leave it at that. So that is the graph. If you wanted to copy this graph and put it in a write-up, what you should do is go to Home, and under Copy, press this button and press Copy as a Picture. And then when you go and paste it in whatever document that you are going to be using, you're going to paste it as a picture, and it will be much more clear, and a lot of professors require this. So just make sure you copy as a picture and paste as a picture. But this graph should give you 100%, no points off. Just make sure that you do everything I said. There is one thing that this data point didn't show us that is important for chemistry graphs, and you can see it here in this next example. So let's pretend that we were just going to graph, this is the original data, that we were just going to graph the data without the blanks. So we're getting rid of the blanks, which you can see down here. Then you can see in this case, there is so much empty space on the graph, whereas in this space, all the data points took up the graph really nicely, so we didn't even have to worry about that. But here, this is way too much empty space, and you will get marked down. One other thing I want to note is we talked about changing this to scientific notation because there was a lot of zeros going on. You can also change the units. So here I changed it to micromolarity instead of just molarity, and you can see that the numbers are much nicer to work with. So that's also a tip to make numbers nicer with less zeros. But professors, they require that there's not a lot of unused space. So how do we fix that? You're just going to click on this axis because first we're going to work with the x-axis. And you can see here that it says bounds, minimum and maximum. So here it goes from 0 to 50. But like we just said, that's way too much. We do not need all that. So I'm going to look here and see where our x numbers start. And they start right around 31.6. So I'm just going to start our x-axis at 30. And then we're going to see, oh my gosh, that changes so much, right? So now the x-axis takes up a lot of that space, so that's a lot better. And let's do the same thing for the y, because this is too much empty space, and I don't want you to lose points. So again, for the y, let's look at what we have for the y. It starts around 0.142. So I might start this guy around 0.138. I just chose that randomly. Oh, that's a little too close. I don't necessarily want that. Let's do 0.13. Okay, so I like that a lot better. So you can see the difference. Now this graph takes up all the space, and you will not lose points because you will lose points if there is empty white space on the graph. You do not want that. And again, we would just take this, copy as picture, and then paste it into whatever Word doc you're using for your write-up or submitting your picture. And again here, you would move that. Perfect. Thanks for watching.